how much is my divorce going to cost? It's one of the first questions that a lot of people ask, and they think that's one of the most important questions they can ask, and actually it's really not. Ultimately, what you are looking for is the positive result in your case, not how much it is going to cost you. That's a common misperception, and sometimes it can lead a lot of clients down the wrong path in making the decisions on what to do when they start a divorce. It is a good question, and it is a question that needs to be asked. However, it should not be the overriding factor in making a decision on choosing a lawyer. So let me come back to the original question. What is your divorce going to cost? Unfortunately, a lot depends on what is involved in your case. Do you have children? Do you have property? Do you have debt? These are all issues that are going to make every divorce a little more complicated, and there's going to be a lot more issues that need to be addressed. One of the key questions is it going to be an amicable divorce or is it going to be a contested divorce? And by that I mean, if everybody is acting above board, if everybody is cooperating in the discovery process, in the exchange of information, in communicating openly and freely, even if you don't agree, I consider that an amicable divorce. If it is a contested divorce, usually that's when people are arguing, that's when people are being oppositional, that's when people are making emotional decisions on how their divorce should move forward because they're more interested in making a point or proving the other person wrong. That's usually what a contested divorce is. One person or the other that's in that divorce, they simply don't want to agree, and they want to argue about every point because they believe they need to win every point. So that's a primary factor in how much a divorce is going to cost. Every divorce can have a few issues or it can have a lot of issues. Some of those issues are easily resolved and some of them are more complicated. One of the most complicated issues in any divorce case when there's children is what the custody and the parenting time is going to be. So a very key factor is how well do the parents communicate, and even more importantly, how interested are they in the best interest of their child or their children. If each party is actually focused on the children, it's usually a little bit easier to make decisions regarding the custody and the parenting time for those kids. If one side or the other feels that they need to prove a point or they need to win, or even worse, if they think that they don't want the other parent to have that custody or that parenting time, and they view it as anything that that other parent gets is something that they don't get, that's going to make a case very complicated, and it makes it more expensive. I know I'm really not talking about the money as much as I'm talking about the time that's involved in it, because that's ultimately the key in determining what a divorce is going to cost at the beginning and what it's going to cost at the end. Virtually every case starts with a retainer. Most attorneys are going to try to determine right at the very beginning how much time is going to be put into that case. Every case is going to have a minimum amount of time that goes into it. For instance, there's the initial gathering of information, there's the initial consultation process, there's the initial paperwork needs to be prepared, and there can be different types of paperwork that needs to be prepared at the beginning of a case. Is it a simple case where you're just preparing a complaint for divorce and the other basic documents, or are there emergencies that are going to take place at the very beginning of that case? That's going to require more paperwork, and it's going to take more time in preparing the paperwork and gathering that information at the very beginning of a case. So once the attorney determines how much time is going to be put in at the very beginning of the case, that's when very often they will determine what the initial retainer is going to be. Now, what is a retainer? A retainer is basically an advance payment for the time that is expected to be put into a particular case. You never know exactly how much time is going to be put into a case overall, most attorneys are going to have a pretty good idea of the minimum amount of time they're going to put into any case, no matter what is going to happen and no matter how complicated it might be or how easy it might be. That initial retainer is an advance payment for the time that's going to be expended on that case. A typical retainer is somewhere between $3,000 to $5,000, and that usually covers somewhere between 10 to 15 hours on a case, depending on what the hourly rate is. The 10 to 15 hours is the basic amount of time that's going to be put into any case. That's what gets the case started. Then once the case is started, there's an exchange of information between each side. And every case is different as to how much information needs to be exchanged. All of the financial information is going to be exchanged and anything else that either side thinks is relevant. How long is that going to take? Some people have all the information and the documentation that they need real early in a case. Other times you have to go searching for it. Then the next step is going to be the communications between either the spouses or their attorneys to try to get a case resolved. If a case is not resolved, there's usually going to be a status conference or a settlement conference, and the judge wants to know what's going on in the case and what can be done to help move that case forward. The next step is usually a mediation. In that mediation, there's more time and expense in conducting that mediation to try to get the case resolved. If the case is not resolved at mediation, the next step is going to be to have a trial. I've just explained a long process of time that is being spent on resolving a divorce case. Whether it's an easy process or a difficult process, it can still be a very long process, and all of these elements that I've just described are things that are going to require more time, and they're going to require more hours being put into a particular case, which is going to increase the cost of that divorce. There's also expenses that can come into play. For instance, do clients need to have an appraisal of real estate? Usually it's a marital home. There's going to be an appraisal to determine a fair value for that property that will be used in that divorce case. Another evaluation that may be necessary is if there's a business. If there's a business, then a business evaluator, a business appraiser is going to be hired. And that business appraiser is going to spend a lot of time, and it's going to cost money for them to do their evaluation for the business. In some cases, there needs to be a psychological evaluation of one or both parents. Sometimes there need to be evaluations for the children. Sometimes there's a larger family evaluation to get a report for a recommendation as to custody and parenting time. So that can add a lot of expense to any divorce if those things are needed. What happens when the retainer is used up? Usually it's handled one of two ways by attorneys. Number one, some attorneys will ask for additional retainer. So let's say, for instance, your initial retainer was $4,000. The attorney assesses that there's going to be another 5 to 10 hours of time being put on that case. They may say, we need an additional $2,000 to use towards work on your case. Other attorneys will bill on a monthly basis or sometimes even a couple times a month to make sure that the bills and the time is being paid for as it is accumulating in a case. Those are some of the details and some of the considerations for determining what your divorce is going to cost. It may seem like a very easy question, but it can turn into a very complicated question, and you need to go into that process being fully aware of all the considerations that are involved. Ultimately, you have to realize that you are paying for the lawyer's time, whether it's 5 hours, 10 hours, and heaven forbid, 100 hours. That is what is going to determine what your divorce is going to cost. You want to go in with your eyes open and understand the process, and hopefully every dollar that you spent on that case puts you in a better place when you are done with that case.